Okay. So we are now going to have a look at the Mahanama Sutta. Mahanama was a cousin of the Buddha. He was a brother of Anuruddha. Anuruddha we have seen already, and he was a cousin. And he stayed at home, whereas Anuruddha became a monk. Yeah, there's a cute story about how that happened. You know that story? I think I told it many times before, a few times before anyway. You know the story of Anuruddha and Mahanama? Don't know the story of Thomas? Okay, because of Tom. You may recognize it once you hear it, but anyway, I'll just tell the story because it's kind of a nice little story. And this is the story when the Buddha went back to visit the Sakyans. This was his family, and so he goes back and visits all the Sakyans. And then they get really inspired. They have this, this family member who has become a Buddha. Wow, it's amazing. I don't know if they really understand that he's a Buddha, but they know something has obviously happened to this relative of theirs. And so then from every family, someone wants to go forth. Someone has become a monk, or I don't think they had nuns yet, but someone wants to become a monk from every family. And then there's the family of Anuruddha and Mahanama. And Mahanama goes to Anuruddha and says, well, all the other families, someone is going forth to become a disciple of the Buddha. But what about our family? There's only the two of us. One of us should go forth. And then Anuruddha says, well, I have been brought up with so much comfort, I'm so spoiled. There's no way that I can go forth. I'm just too soft to be able to go forth. It's too much hardship to go forth. You go forth, I will stay at home. And then Mahanama says to Anuruddha, well, if that is the case, you're going to have to look after all the household duties. Anuruddha said, what? Okay, what is that? What is household duties? Anuruddha was brought up with so much comfort that this is the story Ajahn Brahmali often tells about the nutty cakes. You know the nutty cake story, right? The nutty cakes is that every time Anuruddha wanted some cakes, he would just go to his mum and say, oh, mum, I can have some cakes because okay, here you are, cakes. The last thing a mother should do, right? Give you cakes to the son every time he asks. That's kind of bad parenting. But anyway, that was what happened in those days, according to this. Bad parenting. We shouldn't read some of these things. Any parents here? Probably a few. And so one day he would go to his mum and say, oh, can I have some cakes? And the mum would say, nutty cakes. Nutty means there is no, there aren't any cakes. But Anuruddha had never heard the word there isn't before. He was so kind of spoiled and so kind of, I don't know, maybe called damaged in modern terminology, but he was so spoiled, never heard the word nutty. So he thought that was a kind of cake. He said, yes, please, nutty cakes. That's kind of the story of Anuruddha who wanted his nutty cakes. So anyway, that was how spoiled he was, and that's why when he was asked to go forth, there was no way that he was going to go forth. Mahanama, you go forth, I stay at home. But unfortunately, there are these duties of a householder. So what are those duties? And then Mahanama says, well, the duties are that when the spring comes, you have to till the fields. And after tilling the fields, you have to make the furrows. After making the furrows, you have to kind of put the seeds in. After putting the seeds again, you have to irrigate the fields with water. After irrigating the fields, you have to drain the fields. After draining the fields, you have to weed the fields. And finally, when the harvest comes up, you have to reap it. And after reaping it, you have to, what do you have to do then? You have to thresh it, to get the seeds out. After threshing it, you have to winnow it to get rid of all the dust and all the bad things. After winnowing it, you have to put it into storage. And by the time you get into the storage, the next season begins. And then Anuruddha says, but when does the work stop? And he says, the work never stops, says Mahanama. While they were working in our fields, our fathers and our grandfathers and our forefathers, they all died while they were working in the fields. And Anuruddha said, well, in that case, I will go forth, you stay at home. And that is how Anuruddha became a monk. This is This is the story, and this is why Anuruddha was a monk, and he became number one in kind of the clairvoyant vision, whereas Mahanama was the householder, sowing the fields, irrigating the fields. But actually, it turns out that Mahanama was a very amazing householder. Yeah, he became a stream enterer according to the stories. You see that in some of the other suttas. And here he is, conversing with the Buddha about some very interesting points of Dhamma that are very, very relevant to meditation. And this is why I want to have a look at this particular sutta. So Mahanama Sutta. This is found in the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses of the Buddha, Sutta number 10. And we'll just get straight into it. And as you can see here, the Buddha is actually visiting his relatives. So at one time, the Buddha was staying in the land of the Sakyans, near Kapilavatthu, in the banyan tree monastery. The Nigrodharama is the banyan tree here. Then Mahanama the Sakyan went up to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to him, "Sir, when a noble disciple has reached the fruit and understood the instructions, what kind of meditation do they frequently practice?" So noble disciple has reached the fruit and understood the instructions. What this normally means that they are a stream enterer, they are an Aryan. This is what the fruit, the pala, the kind of the main result of the practice. Having understood the instructions means understanding. Here the instruction, I think, is the sasana. So it's basically understood Buddhism, understood the teaching. That's what it means. Is it sasana? I think so. Okay, now my little helper comes in handy again. Let's have a quick look and see what it says. This means that he's already an Aryan. And of course that may make you think maybe this instruction is only for noble ones. But usually that is not the case. Just because the Aryans are the main recipient of the instructions, what that means is that it works perfectly for the Aryans, but it's also an instruction for everyone else as well. So let's see what it says here. Vinyata sasana. Okay, vinyata is the word. Okay, so vinyata has understood the sasana. So the instruction is sasana. So sasana means understood Buddhism, basically. That's kind of what it means. And so if you understood the teaching, it means you're a noble one. So does that mean, well, does it apply for everyone? Does it apply only for noble ones? Does it mean that now everyone should leave the room and only the noble ones should remain? Well, maybe that would be defeating the purpose a little bit if that happened. There might not be one left here. The Buddha might sit here still, but no. So no, that's not really what it means. What it means is that the noble ones are the ones who can understand these things fully. They will be able to use these teachings 100% precisely because they have understood the instruction. They understand what the Buddha is, they understand all of these things. They are able to really grasp this. Whereas for people who are not noble ones, they will have to use a little bit more of effort to try to understand what these things are. And in a sense, that's good, because when we have to use that effort, this is exactly how we learn about the Dhamma, we learn about the Buddha, we learn how to think about these things in a way that actually makes the meditation work. And so for us, we're going to use this opportunity to see if we can make some headway in understanding these important topics. And if we do, then we have a source of joy, something that is available to us. When you sit down in meditation, you will hopefully make it easier for you to give rise to some of these positive feelings that are required for the meditation to work. So let's see what the Buddha has to say. What kind of meditation do they frequently practice? This is kind of interesting. Frequently, the word for frequently is bahulang. Bahulang means like often or frequently. Much actually is the usual meaning of the word bahula, but anyway, much, they should dwell much like this. And then the Buddha replies, Mahanama, when a noble disciple has reached the fruit and understood the instruction, they frequently practice this kind of meditation. Firstly, a noble disciple recollects the realized one. That blessed one is perfected, a fully awakened Buddha, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, holy, knower of the world, supreme guide for those who wish to train, teacher of gods and humans, awakened, blessed. Yeah, that is the iti piso formula, which many of you will know by heart. Yeah, iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vijja, etc. And that formula that you see there, now you understand what it is. It is the way that we are supposed to remember the Buddha. Yeah, this is what the Buddha himself recommends, how we should remember the qualities of the Buddha. There they are. So this formula is actually incredibly important. Now you can see, well, we chant it all the time. And it is kind of crazy that we don't use more time, try to understand what this actually means. What is the meaning of this? Yeah, what is it? Instead of just doing it in Pali, which not that many of us understand. Yeah, and even if you know it in Pali, it's not really enough, because then you have to reflect, well, what are these terms pointing to? What are the underlying meaning here? Who was the Buddha? What are these qualities? And there are some very interesting things when you look at that formula straight away. One of the things you notice straight away in that sequence, nothing there about supernormal powers. Yeah, most people in the world, they want to see supernormal powers. They want to see the Buddha or the monks or whoever, or the nuns or even or anyone fly through the air and sink into the ground and this kind of stuff, and reading your mind, this kind of thing. And it's interesting, reading your mind, is that possible? I know that it's very easy to project that onto people, to think that people are reading your mind. It's a very, very easy thing to do. And I know maybe we can talk more about that later on. But this is the sort of thing that people are interested in. But there's nothing about that here at all. All of these things here are about the qualities of the Buddha in terms of insight and understanding and his abilities as a teacher. This is what this is about. That is what matters. What has the Buddha really understood? What are his abilities to bring that message out to the world so everyone else can also understand? That is the point of this. So forget about all those supernal powers. They are irrelevant. Yeah. Yes, you see someone fly through the air. It's a bit of entertainment. Yeah. Wow, that's pretty cool. And afterwards, you kind of doesn't really do anything for you. Yeah. So what if someone flies through the air? In the end, it is really nothing but entertainment. It's kind of nice entertainment. It's better than most stuff, but still, it's not all that. It's not really amazing. And then eventually you say, "Oh, it's just some magic trick." Yeah, it's just kind of whatever magicians do, and it doesn't really do anything anymore. So we were going to spend a bit of time reflecting on this formula to understand what it really means, because when you reflect on that formula, this is what is supposed to happen. I'll read through the whole thing before I comment on this. So when a noble disciple recollects the realized one, in other words, the Buddha, their mind is not full of desire, ill will, and confusion. Lobha, dosa, and raga, I think, is the word here. Raga and lobha is basically the same. Raga, yeah, is not full of these things. Yeah, and when you think about the Buddha, your mind is not in the worldly state. Your mind is kind of approaching the Dhammas. The world is left behind. All the defilements of the mind are kind of dispelled. Yeah, by thinking about the Buddha. Isn't that kind of really cool? You think about the Buddha and your mind gets purified automatically. There's something very, very, very nice about this. At that time, the mind is unswerving, based on the realized one. Unswerving here is ujju, it means straight. Yeah, it is not crooked anymore. Straight here means that you see things in the right way. You're no longer biased by the desires and the ill will and these kind of things. Your mind is straight. This beautiful word that you see many places in the suttas. You have the idea of straight view, a straight mind you have here. The idea that the mind is not crooked is a term for defilements in the suttas. A noble disciple whose mind is unswerving or straight finds inspiration in the meaning and the teaching, finds joy connected with the teaching. Inspiration in the meaning and the teaching. Meaning is atta, teaching is dhamma. So the dhamma, the meaning, is what the teaching is pointing to. It is the goal, it is the purpose of the teaching. Where are we going? You understand the results of the practice. You understand why we are doing this. You get a feeling for that purity straight away, because you can feel that your mind becomes pure just by reflecting on the Buddha. So you get a feeling for this path. Where is it going? A feeling for the qualities it entails, for the insight it is about, for the overcoming of suffering, for the achievement of happiness and all of these kind of things. That is what you get a feel for. And then you understand the connection between the Dhamma and that purpose. The Dhamma is what delivers that purpose down the track. This is where it goes. Dhamma and atta are two terms that often go together. One is the source, the other one is the result. So this is kind of how these two things work together. So you start to understand the purpose, what this is about, and you feel inspired by that. Obviously, because you feel inspired because you know that this is really worthwhile. Inspired, Veda, Atta Veda, Dhamma Veda. It is very similar to the Buddhist English word inspiration, because Veda in Pali has this combined meaning of understanding and feeling at the same time. Vedana is feeling. Vidya, which also comes from Veda, is understanding or insight. So it brings with it these two qualities. You feel it, you feel lifted up, and you also understand. This is just like inspiration. When you are inspired, it's like, wow, that's really inspiring. It means you understand something, and you also have an emotional uplift at the same time. Same kind of idea. You can see defilements go, you feel inspired, you can see where all of this is heading. And then, because of that, you find joy connected with the teachings. And so this is where the sequence starts. You find that joy. This is how the joy comes about. Pamudja is the Pali word that is used here. Pamodja, exactly. So you find that joy, and then the sequence that we saw before arises out of this. When you are joyful, rapture springs up. This is the piti. When the mind is full of rapture, the body becomes tranquil, the passaddhi. When the body is tranquil, you feel bliss, sukha. When you are blissful, the mind becomes stilled, samadhi. This is called the noble disciple who lives in balance among people who are unbalanced, who lives untroubled among people who are troubled. They have entered the stream of the teaching and developed the recollection of the Buddha. So this is kind of, you can recognize again, I said that this sequence is very important on the Buddhist path because it occurs in slight variations in so many different places in the suttas. Here it occurs. And what you are doing here when you kind of get into this sequence here, usually at this point you will be doing something like anapanasati, watching your breath. But you have started out by recollecting the Buddha, or you bring the recollecting of the Buddha into it. How much do you recollect the Buddha? Well, sometimes you don't do very much at all. Sometimes you have already done those recollections. You know what the Buddha means. And then as you are watching the breath, you kind of just nudge your mind. The Buddha is my teacher. And bang, straight away, you feel really happy. Other times, because you are starting out trying to make this work, you may try a little bit to start your meditation by remembering the Buddha. What does it mean? And then when the joy comes, then you may start watching the breath, and then you bring it back again. The idea is to bring these various aspects together, and that makes it powerful. Then is when the meditation really takes off. This is kind of the idea here. So how do we do this? How do we reflect on this thing? And so the problem with, I think, remembering the Buddha or recollecting the Buddha is that sometimes it's very hard to relate to the Buddha. How can we relate to someone who is so far away in time? 2,500 years ago, it seems like a long time ago. How can we relate to a person who lived at that time? It's like what age was that? Iron Age or something? It's stone, bronze, whatever, Iron Age. It sounds like when you read the books on geography and history in school, it sounds like some kind of ancient time when surely people were completely different, right? They didn't have mobile phones in those days. Lucky them, right? And so it was a very different society, or so we think. Yeah, so we think. It was a different place on the planet. It was in India. Yeah, most of us have not grown up in India. Yeah, India 2,500 years ago. What has that got to do with us? And then there's one more thing that makes the Buddha seem very alien to us, and that is that he was the Buddha, and we are just ordinary people. Yeah, well, how can we relate to the Buddha? We have this idea of the Buddha as something fabulous and amazing and kind of extraordinary. How can we relate to such a being? Yeah. So one of the most important things that we have to do to be able to relate to the Buddha is start with trying to understand a little bit about who he was as a person. Yeah, and the first thing to understand about the Buddha is that even though it was 2,500 years ago, when you start to read the suttas, you start to see how people behaved, even if it was the Iron Age or whatever it is called at that time. I can't remember my little kind of, various ages from school. It's a long time ago now. But even though it was a different age, you read the suttas, you realize actually people were pretty much like they are now. What difference was there? They had defilements, they got angry with each other, they had lots of desires, they wanted to have happy lives, they wanted to have a good relationship, they wanted to have a nice wife and a nice husband, they wanted their kids to behave themselves. They had a fair amount, they wanted to have nice houses, Basically, it was the same. This separation that we feel, we think it is a long time ago, it's just an illusion, really. There isn't all that much of a difference. People have always been people. Human psychology has pretty much been the same, always. There isn't really that big difference. And once you start to see these little things in the suttas, what life was like, you start to be able to recognize, actually, there isn't that different from our society at all. And whether it was in India or Australia, actually, what is the difference between our societies, wherever we are born in this world? Does it make that much difference? I don't think so. It doesn't really make that much difference at all. Yes, the culture is superficially different. We wear slightly different clothes. We look a little bit different. We have different customs. We eat slightly different food. Whatever. Our music is a bit different, whatever it might be. But under that very thin, shallow surface of difference is the humanity that connects us all to each other, which basically is the same everywhere. And this is what you see. This is why the suttas make sense to us. They make sense to us because you recognize your own psychology, your own proclivities, your own desires, and all of these things are basically the same for every one of us. It doesn't matter if it was India 2,500 years ago. Human beings are still the same. And I think that follows from the Buddhist outlook. The Buddhist outlook is this idea that things just go round and round and round. They always come back to certain things. If you have been born in a certain realm, it is because you have certain qualities. So we are all born in the human realm because we have certain qualities. It doesn't matter if it was 2,500 years ago or 2,500 eons ago. It will still have been roughly the same. Why? Because these are the qualities that lead to rebirth in the human realm. And this is very different from kind of modern ideas of history, the kind of history that we are used to in the Western societies, which is like a linear history. You start over here and kind of there's a linear progression or linear change, and one day you end. Well, actually, exactly where do you end is very unclear, but you're always progressing towards something. To what exactly are you progressing to? I don't know if that kind of our image of progress is really all that interesting anyway, but it's this linear idea of history. Of course, if there is a linear idea of history, then people in the past may have been very different because there is a sense of progress. But that is not how the world works, says the Buddha, says Buddhist teachings. It is more like just this ongoing thing. It's a circular idea of time, or maybe a spiral idea of time. It's never completely circular. There's always some change. And so things are much more the same, regardless of where you are in time, in space, and all of these kind of things. It doesn't matter so much. And so for that reason, communication with the Buddha is not all that difficult. Why? Because it is basically the same. And this is the feeling when you read the suttas, you get precisely that feeling. But there is this other interesting thing about this, and this is the problem of the Buddha being the Buddha. How can we speak? How can we communicate with the Buddha? How can we have any understanding of the Buddha? The Buddha is like, wow, the Buddha is like, even what does it mean to be an arahant? What does it mean? Your mind is just completely different. Surely he practiced for 4 incalculable eons, and he's just different from us. How can we have any connection to the Buddha? And this is where we have to be very careful, because actually this is one of those things that I mentioned already, that when you read the suttas, you can see 2 different aspects of the Buddha, and we need to unify these different aspects in a way that really starts to make sense to us. And these 2 different aspects are, on the one hand, the Buddha as a human being, and on the other hand, the Buddha as an enlightened person. And we need to unify this in a way that actually starts to make sense, that actually we can relate to somehow. That is very important, because then we can take the Buddha as our teacher. Then the Buddha becomes someone we can kind of approach. When you go to the suttas, it should feel like you are in the presence of the Buddha. The Buddha is now talking to you. You can actually, in a sense, you can ask questions of the Buddha. You can say, I wonder about this. Okay, where is the sutta about that? And then you look up the sutta, and lo and behold, the Buddha gives you the answer. So we can almost have like a 2-way communication with the Buddha. But it's important to feel that the Buddha is your teacher. Not just that he is some kind of strange, unusual kind of being that has no relation to ordinary people. And so the first thing to do, I think, is then to understand the Buddha as a human being. And I was kind of trying to do that the other day a little bit. I was talking about the Buddha when he tries to quell the arguments between the monks, and the monks don't listen to him. They say kind of, oh, please just go and enjoy yourself in meditation. We will look after this. It's rude. How can you say that to the Buddha? It's like saying, it's kind of really, really strange when you think about it. But when you think about it, you understand the reason why that happened is because to them, the Buddha was just one monk among monks. Yes, he was the leader, but he was still just a person. And that's why they treated him in that way. And then, as I also mentioned in the suttas, you see people meeting the Buddha or meeting the monks, and they can't tell the difference, which one is the Buddha and which one are the other monks. It is not obvious to them who is who. And that is because the Buddha didn't really stand out. He didn't look like some alien or anything like that. He looked like a person. He didn't have all of these 32 marks, the Mahapurisa Lakkhana, the marks of a great man. He probably didn't have those marks. That's a kind of a later tradition. Because if he had those marks, you will be able to tell straight away, that's the Buddha, because he just looked weird, right? And there is even a thing in the commentaries in the Vinaya which suggests the Buddha, I don't think it actually means that, but this is how some people interpret it, that he was 3 times the size of an ordinary person. It's like, he was kind of, wow, the Buddha. No wonder. And this is the problem. The problem is that once we look at Buddhist history in this way, we look at the commentaries, we look at how things developed over time. You get the Bodhisattva ideal, you get all of these things. And the further in time you go from the time of the Buddha, the more strange the Buddha becomes, the less human he becomes, the more he becomes this, wow, the Buddha is just this universal principle of Dhamma or whatever. And you can no longer relate to him as an ordinary person. It becomes impossible. The further in time away you come from the Buddha, the more remarkable and amazing the qualities of the Buddha become. And that is kind of part of the problem. So we need to go back to the earlier sources. How did they treat the Buddha? What kind of person was he? How did they relate to the Buddha? And so he wouldn't be recognizable. In some suttas, they talk about the Buddha going out for alms round in the city, in the town. Imagine the Buddha coming out with a bowl. It's a very humble thing to do. You go with a bowl from house to house. People put some rice in the bowl. They put maybe a banana, or something like that, or a little bit of food. And then the Buddha would go. Where would he go? I don't know. Maybe he'd go to a refectory, place dining room, or maybe back to the monastery, or maybe the outskirts of the village, and he would just eat his alms food like all the other monks. How would you feel if the Buddha came as an arms round to your house? What would happen, Narayana, if one day the Buddha came to your house and was standing outside with his alms bowl? How would you feel? You feel, wow. Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine almost. It's really hard to imagine. Because even me, I have grown up in a Western society. I don't have all that traditional learning about Buddhism as someone who has grown up in a Buddhist society has. But even for me, the Buddha is like, wow, the Buddha. It's really hard to really imagine the Buddha as an ordinary person, actually. But this is what you see in the suttas. He comes to your house, He receives alms food. He goes down the street. People see him. No one bats an eyelid, It's just another monk walking down the street. It is not such a big deal. And so you start to see the Buddha in these ordinary circumstances, and he comes across as an ordinary human being. So what that means, of course, actually before, what it means is that the Buddha is an ordinary human being. And you can see this very clearly also when you look at the Buddha, who he was before his awakening. Before his awakening, he talks about the problems that he had. He talks about what it was like not to be awakened, what it is like to be an ordinary person in the world. And you can see he was very much like us. The Buddha talks about his attachment to his child and his wife, and his family, and all of these things. We look at this sutta later on. And it's interesting, because it talks about this, and then it says, okay, this is the ignoble search. I have been doing the ignoble search. Okay, let me go to the noble search instead. And one of the things that does, it really undercuts this whole idea of the bodhisattva ideal. Because the bodhisattva ideal is this ideal that you have perfected the 10 paramis for 4 incalculable eons. One of those paramis is the nekama parami, the renunciation parami. And he's still attached to his wife and son, and his cattle and his wealth and everything, according to the sutta. He's been practicing this for 4 incalculable eons, seems to have got nowhere. So how much, what does that mean for these paramis? Well, what it means, of course, is that these are later ideas about what it takes to be a Buddha. It's only in the suttas, it's only in his last life that the Buddha is a bodhisattva when he decides to go forth. And so you see, the Buddha is very much like us. He has the same attachments to his family, to his things that he has in his life. He has defilements of the mind. He talks specifically about how to overcome the defilements of his mind in the Dveda Vitaka Sutta, Majjhima 19. In the Bhayabhairava Sutta, he talks about the fear and dread that he has when he's practicing in the forest. In the Bodhiraja Kumara Sutta, Majjhima 85, he talks about his wrong views, about the idea that it is through pain that you reach happiness. That's why he practiced the Jhana practices, the self-tormenting, before he became a monk. So in one area after the other, he was basically a human being. He had the same problems that we had. He was trying to solve the problems of old age and death and all of these kind of things. Sure, he had probably had some very special qualities. He also had some very powerful spiritual qualities. But in the end, he was a human being. He had the same difficulties, the same things to resolve that we have. And so now you can start to imagine the Buddha as a human being. What that means is that you can approach the Buddha. You can go up to him and say, oh, Venerable Sir, I have this problem. Can you please explain? And you can have a communication, human to human, knowing that he will understand what you are going through because he has gone through the same kind of things. And now the Buddha becomes approachable. Now the Buddha becomes someone you can actually deal with. Now the Buddha becomes someone who can teach you directly. When you read the suttas, you can be in the presence of the Buddha and you kind of feel that you are dealing with another human who knows and understands what is going on. This is kind of the idea here. And then there is, of course, the other side of the Buddha. And this is kind of, in many ways, of course, this is the really interesting side of the Buddha. Once we have established that he is human, then it is what he has done with that humanity. That is what is interesting here. Yeah? So the Buddha then takes that humanity and he goes, and we will talk more about this later on, because it's very inspiring to see what the Buddha to be, how he practiced, what he did. He takes that, and what does he do with it? He says there is a problem, I want to find a solution to all of these problems, and lo and behold, he finds the answer to the meaning of life. Yeah, that's kind of really amazing. How can anyone find the answer to the meaning of life? I don't know about you, but when I was younger, I was kind of obsessed with the meaning of life. I was like, okay, here I am, born in this world. Thank you very much, Mum and Dad. Well, I never said that, but that's kind of what it would have been a bit interesting. So, born into this world, go to school, right? Work very hard. I didn't actually work all that hard at school. I was a pretty lazy student. But anyway, some people work really hard, like really good students. And then you go to university, yeah, and you do go through all of these things, and you see everyone doing the same thing. My grandparents did this, my parents did this, my great-grandparents did this, everyone in society does this. Is anyone really happy? A little bit happy, a little bit sad. Yeah, everyone going through the same problem, everyone eventually dying. And it seems like a strange thing. Why are we doing this? Yeah, what is all of this about anyway? Born into this world, you follow what everyone else does. No one really thinks for themselves. Everyone is equally blind. Everyone is like a sheep, walking towards the cliff, falling off the cliff and then dying. That's what we are like, right? It's kind of madness when you think about it. And so this is when you start to think, yeah? And most people, what happens to most people, they look at that life and they think, wow, this doesn't seem very meaningful, and yet they end up doing it because there is no other solution. But then the Buddha to be comes along and says, no, I will find a solution. And then he walks off into the forest, and lo and behold, he finds a solution to the meaning, the answer to the question of the meaning of life. And that is like just really, really extraordinary here. Because this is one of those intractable questions that philosophers and religious and spiritual people have been asking them since the dawn of existence. There is no dawn of existence, so it goes a long way back. It has always been a question been asking us since the previous Buddha, basically. He was the last one who found the answer to the meaning of life. No, and that is what the Buddha discovered. Why did he discover that? Well, because he discovered the end of craving. The end of craving is the same as finding the answer to the meaning of life. Because the reason you stop craving is because you found the ultimate meaning. There's nothing more to be done, so why? There's nothing to crave or desire. And so you have come to the end of the path. And so that is the Buddha, the full insight into the human condition. Understanding what the human condition is. Having fathomed the deepest kind of meditation that is available to humanity, going beyond that, seeing this world, seeing the idea of rebirth after rebirth. This is kind of what he does. And this is what is so amazing about the Buddha. That is why we honor the Buddha. That is why the Buddha is so special. This is what the Buddha is all about. And then when we come to that kind of double realization that here is a human being, but a human being who has taken this human condition, taken it to the highest possible point, to the pinnacle of what it means to be human, abandoning all the defilements, clearing out the mind, making the mind absolutely lucid, and understanding the world fully. Wow, that is amazing. And the fact that it is a human being makes it even more powerful, because then it is someone we can relate to. It is not some airy-fairy idea of some kind of God or whatever that we can't really relate to anyway. It is down to earth. It is real. You can be in the presence of the Buddha. You can check out the Buddha's qualities. These days we have to do that by reading the suttas. And actually it is pretty impressive what you see, even just by reading the suttas. And so this gives us an ability to start to deal with the Buddha. It doesn't matter that he existed 2,500 years ago. The thing that we need to understand is that he was a human being who was extraordinary in these particular ways. So This is for me like the beginning point of understanding the Buddha. Many of the things that I'm saying now are just my ideas of how to relate to the Buddha, to reduce the gap between us and the Buddha, to kind of take that away, and then so we can actually relate to this teacher. And so when you read the suttas, you get this feeling, wow, the Buddha's talking to me. But is the Buddha really talking to you? Wasn't the Buddha talking to those people at that time, right? He had an audience in front of him. Surely he was talking to them, not to us. Wrong. He's talking to us. How do we know that? And this may seem, again, quite extraordinary, but actually remember, and this is one of the things that I always bring out at this particular point, remember that when the Buddha gave these teachings, he was talking about setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma. The Dhammacakkappavattana is what he was doing. And the idea of the Dhammacakka, the wheel of the Dhamma, is the idea that when you start these teachings in the world, when you set in motion these teachings, when you teach one generation, they will understand, they will realize these teachings. And when they realize these teachings, they will pass it on to the next generation, who will then also realize it. And then there has a certain momentum to it that will travel on in the world, from one era to the next one, from one generation to the next, from one culture to the next one, until it comes even here to Perth. Isn't this great? And it comes right here to Perth. And so the Buddha, in a sense, he foresaw, he knew that this teaching would spread out into the world. He knew there would be people in various places around the world, wherever that is, obviously including Perth, even though he obviously didn't specifically know about Jhana Grove or anything like that. Kind of obvious, but still, he knew that this is the sort of thing that will happen. And for that reason, when you then read the suttas, he is not teaching only the people in front of him. He is considering people in the future. He is considering people of different cultures. And so when he teaches, when he gives the Dhamma, he gives it in a way that has a very universal flavor to it. When you read the suttas, everyone can recognize what is going on. It is not that difficult to kind of understand what is happening here. It is not a very kind of Indian culture that you read when you read the suttas. You read something that is actually accessible almost to anyone. Why is that? Because the Buddha knew that he would teach people in the future. So he is your teacher. The Buddha was thinking of us when he gave these teachings. It is not just theoretical, it actually that is what is going on. And so when you read the suttas, start to get this feeling for the Buddha. The Buddha is this extraordinary teacher who lived 2,500 years ago, the greatest spiritual genius in human history, and he is our teacher. Why? Because he was thinking of people just like us when he gave those teachings. And then when you read the suttas, it's more like, oh, okay, this is for me. This is the Buddha talking to me. My teacher is the greatest spiritual person in the history of the world. How did you end up having such a teacher? How did I end up having such a teacher? It's kind of extraordinary, isn't it? And the fact that we have such a teacher is just such an amazing thing. And the more you kind of understand how extraordinary that is, whatever conditions and causes made you come to this point in your life, the more kind of you understand that, the more you realize what's going on. It becomes very powerful. I remember I was in Sri Lanka only a few weeks ago, and I love to travel to Sri Lanka. It's a beautiful green island. If you have a chance, I would really recommend you to go to Sri Lanka. Go to India first, and then maybe go to Sri Lanka afterwards. You should all be coming to me to India in December. Why? No. I'm going to India in December, and some of you, I'm not sure if anyone here is coming along, but anyway, I will be going there. But Sri Lanka is also very interesting to go to. It has a lot of old Buddhist sites, and you travel around and you see ancient caves where the monks and maybe some nuns have been practicing for thousands of years. Yeah, some of those caves are really, really ancient. They go back to the time when Buddhism was established in Sri Lanka 2,300 years ago, or whatever it is, when Mahinda and Sanghamitta, the daughter and son of King Ashoka, they came to Sri Lanka according to the traditional story, which, we have no reason to think that wasn't true. And then they converted the first king in Sri Lanka. Yeah, Mahinda came to Mahintale, and I've actually been to Mahintale in Sri Lanka, to where the Mahinda came first, and then later on Sanghamitta came on the boat, and she brought the Bodhi tree to Sri Lanka. Yeah, so the reason why they have the Bodhi tree in Sri Lanka is because of a bhikkhuni. Yeah, that's what one of the things the nuns have done for Sri Lanka. Isn't that that's really nice? And so when I was in Sri Lanka recently, we were in this really nice retreat center, and one of the monks who was there and who was inviting us, or he is part of this group of Ajahn Brahmali disciples in Sri Lanka. And he's very old now, he's 80 years old, and he's much more senior than I am. This is actually a Danish monk. And he told me the fact that, he said when he was young, he was this was a long time ago. If he's 80 now, he was young back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, yes, maybe 60s, probably 50s maybe even. So when he was growing up, a teenager, it was the hippie time. Yeah, so he said he was a little bit of a hippie himself, And the hippies were into spirituality to some extent. Yeah, the flower power, and they were doing some dodgy things and some good things. They were doing a variety of things, those hippies. But they were a little bit into spirituality. And he said that he remembered when he was a young man, he heard about people who were practicing the spiritual path and who were getting into profound states of meditation. And just that he said it was joyful, because he knew that there are people in the world who are finding something really meaningful, something profound, something really inspiring. And he said he felt joy just by the fact of hearing that there are people who have these kind of discoveries is wonderful. And this is just ordinary people. Now we have the Buddha, for goodness sake. We have something far, far more than that. We have someone in our life who can point us beyond the ordinary realities of the life to the most profound meditations, to the most profound insights. That this exists in the world is just really amazing. And so you allow yourself to be lifted up by this idea that there is such a thing, there is such a person. This person is your teacher. These teachings are available in the present day. This is what is going on here. So you try to get this sort of frame of mind, and then as you do that, you start then to get an idea of how to relate to the Buddha. So one last thing is an exercise that you may wish to do, and this is something that I sometimes like to do, and usually I teach this on every retreat because I think it is a very useful way of thinking about things. And this is the idea of a meeting with the Buddha. Imagine that you're going to meet the Buddha. Imagine the Buddha, of course, very often you read the suttas and you see the Buddha goes to the day's meditation after the meal. He will go into the forest somewhere, and he will go for the day's meditation. And so imagine that one day you hear the Buddha is here. I don't know if he's here in Serpentine or he's wherever you happen to be at that time. The Buddha is here, someone tells you. And you say, well, where is the Buddha? He's sitting in the forest over there. And then you think, wow, if the Buddha is here, I have to take this opportunity. How can I not take the opportunity? And as soon as that idea comes into your mind that you have to take the opportunity, you start feeling a bit nervous. The Buddha? Did you say the Buddha? I said the Buddha. You said the Buddha? I said the Buddha. You said the Buddha? I said the Buddha. This is actually a quote from the suttas. This is when Anathapindika heard about the Buddha. This is exactly like that. Anathapindika was visiting his brother-in-law. His brother-in-law lived in Rajagaha. Anathapindika lived in Savatthi. And so he went to visit his brother-in-law. His brother-in-law was this very wealthy merchant. The distance between the two cities is many hundred kilometers. Would have taken a long time to travel. And so he arrives at his brother-in-law's house. And when he arrives, his brother-in-law is so busy, he has no time to look after Anathapindika. Usually the brother-in-law would look after him, make sure he has a drink, sit down, have a chat with him. But now he's just busy. He's telling all his servants, because lots of servants when you were very wealthy in those days, do this, do that, prepare this, cook this, get things in order. And then finally, when the day is coming to an end, then the brother-in-law comes to Anathapindika, welcomes him, and then Anathapindika says to him, usually when I come to your house, you look after me, you welcome me, yeah, I'm your guest, but now you ignore me, and you're doing all of these things. What's happening? Is the king together with the fourfold army coming to your house? Can you imagine the king and the fourfold army? That's pretty large stuff. Are you having some kind of magnificent wedding? What is going on? And his brother-in-law says, no, none of those things are going on. Yeah, none of that. But tomorrow, the Buddha, together with the Sangha, is coming for lunch. Anathapindika goes, did you say Buddha? I said Buddha. Did you say Buddha? I said Buddha. Did you say Buddha? I said Buddha. That's where that comes from. So it wasn't kind of random when I said that. And then Anathapindika, he goes to sleep. He tries to go to sleep, but he can't really sleep because he knows that in the morning he's going to see the Buddha, right? So actually before that he says, well, he gets so excited he can't wait for the next day. So he says to the brother-in-law, can I go and see that Buddha now? And he says, no, now is the wrong time. You have to wait till tomorrow morning. Yeah. So then he goes to sleep and he keeps on waking up all the time. Yeah, what time is it? He didn't have that kind of watch. Yeah, he didn't have a watch like that, but he was just looking out. Is the sun coming up, right? He was looking over the sun there. And then he wakes up 3 times during the night, yeah? And then eventually he's starting to get a little bit light. Okay, so he kind of gets out of bed and starts walking. But it's still really, really dark outside. So he becomes really frightened, especially when it comes to the city gates. The city gates, according to the story, get opened by devas. This is what happens in some of the stories. The devas opens, they ding, he walks out. It's pitch black outside, yeah? You can imagine walking into the jungle in those days. Tigers, lions, ghosts, beasts of various kinds, yeah? It would be scary. It's scary enough to walk into the forest here, yeah, at night. I don't know if you feel comfortable walking into the forest at night. It's kind of nice, close to the center, you can still see the lights, it's kind of okay. But when you lose sight of the lights, yeah, and you have no idea where you are, and you hear the branches kind of breaking somewhere near you. Something is walking, yeah, not far away. That's when you start to get a bit nervous. Usually just a kangaroo, but you never know what it is. And so eventually he makes it all the way to the Buddha, yeah, because his faith is so powerful. And then when he meets the Buddha is kind of walking back and forth outside, doing what is called chankama in the suttas. And then he says to Anathapindika, come Sudatta. And then they sit down, and then Anathapindika says to the Buddha, I hope you have slept well. And the Buddha says, the one who is awakened, the one who is free from defilements, always sleeps well, something to that effect. And Anathapindika is just so filled with faith and confidence. He kind of is all completely overflowing. And then based on that, then he decides, he goes back again and he builds the very famous Anathapindika's monastery, Anathapindika's Arama in Savatthi, which then becomes the main monastery for the Buddha later on. And that is the story of Anathapindika meeting the Buddha. So the question now is, when you go to meet the Buddha, will it be the same? Yeah, you are asking your interlocutor, the person you're talking to, did you say Buddha? I said Buddha. And then you start walking off into the forest in the direction of where you think the Buddha is. And as you walk towards the Buddha, you start to feel again a bit nervous, yeah? The Buddha is a person there's no being in the world, no human being in the world with a greater reputation than the Buddha. Here is someone you know straight away, this person is going to be able to read your mind, that's what you think. Are you ready to have your mind read? You know what it's like, if someone says, don't think of an elephant, straight away you think of an elephant, you don't have any choice. If someone says, now you have to think only good thoughts, bad thoughts come, yeah, because that's how the mind works, so the mind will rebel. So the bad thoughts come regardless of what you do. So it's kind of scary. You don't know what's going to happen. Actually, it's not scary at all, because Buddha's a harm. Doesn't matter what you think. You can think whatever you like, and the Buddha's not going to do anything. But still, it's a bit scary. And so then you approach, you walk into this forest, yeah, and eventually you see this person sitting at the foot of a tree. And this person, what does it look like? It looks like a monk. Yeah, the Buddha is someone with a shaven head. A Buddha wears some kind of monk's robes, not quite like we do, but something similar to that, sitting at the foot of a tree. And when you see the Buddha, that is when you start to calm down. You start to feel a bit more at ease. Because there's something about seeing a Buddha that is extraordinarily powerful. There's a peace. There's a benevolence about the Buddha that spreads beyond the Buddha. It spreads into the environment. Right? You know what it's like. Sometimes you go to a place that is really peaceful. You go to a place that has a special vibe about it. It feels really, really nice. Yeah? Even the hall at Bodhinyana Monastery has a very nice feel to it sometimes. And so as you're approaching the Buddha, you start to feel this really good vibe. Yeah. And then the closer you get, the more calm you become, because that benevolence, the feeling that you are in this force field of kindness, of metta, of compassion, of understanding, means there's no way you can be frightened anymore. So you calm down. And then you go all the way up to the Buddha. Of course, you keep a respectful distance, maybe, 2 or 3 meters away, something like that. Yeah, depending on how you feel. And then you come all the way up, and then the Buddha looks at you. Yeah, and the Buddha says, sit down. Okay, so you sit down. Yeah, and then you sit down. And then the Buddha says, where have you come from? Oh, I come from Serpentine, I come from Jhana Grove. Yeah. Okay, welcome. Have you had enough to eat? Yeah, that's what we saw before. Are you okay? Are you... and then maybe I heard on the first day there wasn't enough food for everyone, so maybe, I'm feeling a bit hungry. But okay, you can eat afterwards, yeah? You have something more afterwards or something like that. So then the Buddha kind of sets you become really at ease, because the Buddha is talking to you like an ordinary human being, making you feel relaxed, making you feel at ease. And then the Buddha asks you, why have you come? And then you feel a little bit kind of sheepish, because you realize that your questions are not really worthy of the occasion. Yeah, it's like, well, and you have some kind of silly problem. Oh, I've got a problem with my girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. Yeah, please help. Yeah, but of course the Buddha, he knows. This is the whole point of the Buddha. You may feel a bit sheepish about your question, but the Buddha knows what human beings are like. These are the important things in our life, how things are going with our girlfriend or boyfriend, our family, our children, our parents, whatever it is. These are the important things to us. And so the Buddha knows that that's what you're going to say, and that's perfectly okay. And then the Buddha says, be kind, be compassionate. Everyone has suffering in their life. Remember, they're trying their best given their conditions. Just be kind, and then you will overcome the problem, and everything will be okay. It's so simple. The teachings are so basic. There's nothing really super duper profound, except it is profound. It is profound not because of the words that are being said. You knew this already. The point of the Buddha, the point of any teacher, is really to awaken the wisdom that you already have within you. That is how we can recognize these teachings. It is not what he says that is profound, but where he's coming from. Again, this feeling of benevolence, the feeling of peace, the feeling of something really, a wisdom that is extraordinary beyond what almost anyone has in this world. That is the feeling that you have. And because you have this feeling, these words sink in a way that no words usually ever sink into your mind, into your heart. They lodge themselves inside of you. And now, all you want to do at this point, when the Buddha is finished, is to bow down, because you understand that you are in the presence of something extraordinary. You understand that this is not just a person. This is like a person, but like wisdom incarnate. This is teachings. All good qualities come together in a human body and a human mind. And you want to bow down to that wisdom. You want to bow down to the kindness and compassion that you see in the Buddha. You're not bowing down to a human being. That's not what it feels like, even though the Buddha is human. It feels like you're bowing down to these qualities that are there, manifesting through the Buddha or in the Buddha. And so you bow down. And this is what I said yesterday. The beauty of bowing down, when you see those qualities, because you respect them, the power of that bowing down is that you are developing those qualities within you because you are respecting them by bowing down to them. This is the power of bowing down. So please bow. It's a beautiful thing to do. Remember what you're doing. This is what you're respecting when you're bowing. It's something very beautiful. And then you are developing those qualities within yourself through that act of doing that. So you bow down to the Buddha, and then you get up, and then you kind of slowly walk away. You don't turn around with your back towards the Buddha because that feels really weird, but you kind of go a little bit sideways, like it says in the suttas. You keep your left side, right side. You circumambulate the Buddha with the right side towards him. But get this right, it's the right side. And then you depart. And then when you depart, you feel that you have been affected by something extraordinarily profound. You've had this a positive trauma, is what they can call this kind of experience. This is something I learned from Ajahn Brahmali, the word positive trauma. It's really nice. It's so positive, you can never really forget this experience again. And so you walk away, and then when you walk back to your boyfriend or girlfriend, your parents, your children, whatever it might be, you know what you have to do. You understand the power of compassion, the power of kindness, the power of suffering in the world. And because you understand that, you live in the right way. You do what needs to be done. And these teachings, that very simple teaching, it stays with you. It stays with you because the power of the example of the Buddha, you can never really forget it again. And then eventually the day comes when you want to go back to the Buddha again. You want to come back to the suttas because you want to understand more about these teachings. That positive trauma has laid a seed inside of you that eventually will ripen in awakening itself. Coming back to these teachings again and again and again because you understand there's something very profound, very deep, very beautiful going on here. This is where the real meaning in life is to be found. So, I have gone a little bit over time because I was kind of just going. So there you are. So that is all for now. So please continue enjoying yourself and we'll see you back again this evening.